Hey folks, this is the recap from Washington, D.C. As you know, the murder of George Floyd, it just devastated it devastated our country. Most people are simply heartbroken, and they are aghast at what they watched on their television screens. And the one thing, it united our nation because we know what we saw was absolutely wrong. And of course, there was people demanded action in Congress, and Congress wanted to do something about it. So there were two bills crafted, one in the House and one in the Senate. And there are many things that are the same in the two bills. I just want to walk you through some of that. Now, I co-sponsored the Senator Scott bill in the House, but both bills address the use of force, had something to say about what we call no-knock warrants. Limit the use of chokeholds by law enforcement, increase the use of body-worn cameras or body cameras, created a database for police personnel records, and promoted de-escalation training. So all those issues were in both bills. And so in the Senate, it requires 60 votes just to move forward with anything. And they could not get to the 60 votes. It fell down on completely partisan lines. The Democrats voted against, Republicans voted for. So the problem with that is, and the tragedy of that is that the bill never even got considered. Senator Scott and leadership in the Senate offered to hear the amendments and have votes on the amendments from the Democrats, but the Democrats just voted not even to consider the bill. In the House, of course, it included these things, but it included a whole lot of other things that were very problematic. And I want to let you know that I spoke to our local law enforcement agencies to get their take on these bills and see what might work, what might not, what things could potentially make matters worse while we're trying to find solutions and make a difference. And they all agree with the de-escalation training, for instance. None of them sanctioned chokeholds. So some of this stuff was pretty easy, but for instance, the database, both bills had a database, but on the House bill, the Democrat bill, the database would allow private citizens to access the database and see if a police officer, let's say he was reprimanded for something irrelevant to his duties, like maybe showing up late for work, maybe his wife was sick and he had to stay home and watch the children for a couple hours or something like that. And also would allow personal information about police officers to be accessed by anybody in the community or outside the community, so to speak. And so what you have there is a potential for people that disagree with the police, that are unhappy with the police, then visiting or going to the police officer's home. Which, look, police are just like the rest of us. In many cases, they're just doing a job, and we don't want their families attacked. We don't want them attacked they got a tough job. And so that was just one of the issues that I could not support that bill. My point in telling you all this is that I think there's a lot that we have in common about this, both Democrats, Republicans, liberals, conservatives, etc. And we should focus on those things instead of the things that we can't seem to agree on, and at least do something regarding police misconduct where it occurs. So right now, the good news is that the president has signed an executive order to get to some of these things, including a database. So even while we have not been able to come to an agreement in Congress, some of these things are occurring, and that's the silver lining. And I just hope that this isn't the end of the conversation. So that bill, again, the Senate didn't move forward on their bill. The House passed a bill that I did not support. It will probably, unless it's changed significantly, never come up in the Senate. And so that's where that stands. I signed a letter with Representative Scalise, who is a member of the House Select Subcommittee on the Coronavirus Crisis, asking Attorney General Shapiro to investigate the Governor Wolf's decision to mandate. Understand that the governor has mandated that nursing homes, personal care facilities, long-term care facilities accept COVID-19 patients during this pandemic. Now, the one thing we knew in March, when we didn't know a whole lot at all about coronavirus, the virus out of China, Wuhan province, et cetera, is that it was really dangerous for elderly folks, especially elderly folks that had other unrelated health problems, high blood pressure, obesity, diabetes, something like that. It was really, really problematic for them. And so to make sure, or to ensure, or to require that nursing homes and places where a lot of elderly people are present are subject to exposure to the coronavirus seems just completely crazy, quite honestly. And I've been asking questions of the governor and the health secretary for some time now. I've written multiple letters, op-eds on the thing, asking for how this policy was derived, what are the metrics behind it, why is it still in place? It isn't in place in New York State, but it is still in place in Pennsylvania, to the point where 4,500 Pennsylvania seniors have died due to COVID-19 in nursing homes and these personal care or long-term facility. It represents nearly 70% of the state's deaths in Pennsylvania. And so the Select Committee on the Coronavirus, which is under the House Oversight and Oversight Committee, sent the Governor Wolf a letter asking for information on the decisions his administration has made. And the governor, as you might imagine, has not complied with those requests, not any of the answer or the questions that I have asked or anybody else in this regard. And I think at a minimum, whether you agree with me, disagree with me, whether I agree with the governor or disagree with the governor, we ought to know. The public has the right to know about this policy and why it's there. And blaming the federal government, let me be clear about this too, because I was questioned on this. The administration, Governor Wolf and the Secretary of Health, have blamed the federal government on this requirement. You can call our office, we can show you very directly. That is not the case. There's nobody at the federal government that has required states to have their nursing facilities accept COVID-19 positive patients. That's solely a Pennsylvania requirement, not a federal government requirement. So we're involved in that. Also, last couple of days, asked AG Barr, called on the Attorney General to take full advantage of all actions available to him, including investigations, arrests, and prosecutions of those vandalizing and defacing churches, national monuments, public property, looting, and small business. Now, to be clear, this is in many cases, a local law enforcement issue. And if local law enforcement isn't allowed to do it or told to stand down by elected officials, whether it's the mayor or the governor, that's problematic and should not be happening. But if these events are occurring on federal property, or if these events are occurring that violate American citizens' civil rights protected at the federal level, that's where the Attorney General should step in. Protesting is always in order if you seek redress from the government. Constitutional authority to do that, fully support that. But nobody has a constitutional right or any right to deface property, private property, to act in a lawless manner, setting fires, injuring people, and in some cases killing people. That is unacceptable at any level. And law enforcement at the local, state, and federal level need to make sure that does not occur. So we asked the Attorney General to do what he can. Of course, we're also calling on local state and local elected officials to do what they can to not allow this lawlessness to go on, and to empower their law enforcement agencies to make sure that arrests are made and prosecutions occur where appropriate. Groups like Antifa are real, and they're causing tremendous damage and harm in many places where they're acting out. It's a shame, and our country just literally needs to put an end to it. Also, we had a vote on D.C. statehood. The Democrats proposed to make Washington, D.C. the 51st state. It ignores the Constitution and would fundamentally alter the constitutional concept of a federal city. So the constitutional concept is that the seat of the federal government should not be in its own state because it would give overwhelming authority and power to that state. And that's why the District of Columbia was set aside from the additional states. Now, citizens in the District of Columbia have the right to vote. That's not a question. But what this is simply, they're saying, well, they don't have a representation. They do have representation in their delegate, Eleanor Holmes Norton. But if they really were interested in what they're talking about, they would just allow Maryland to cede back that land, or the District of Columbia to cede back the land to Maryland, and allow those representatives to be elected out of the state of Maryland. But I will tell you, doing that would then require Maryland, who gerrymanders very heavily their legislative districts, to then have probably another Republican district in the northern portion of the state, which they don't want to do. And so this is really just, quite honestly, an attempt to attain two more very Democrat senators. Just keep in mind that a Republican has never been the district's mayor, and has never won in the district. So that's what this is. A permanent, two new permanent Democrat senators. And it's, quite honestly, it's all about politics. So I think that completes the recap for the week. We've got a lot going on next week. H.R. 2, which will be transportation and infrastructure bill. That will probably take up a lot of the week, and then some other healthcare bills that we're going to take a look at. So I'll give you the recap then. Until then, I hope you stay safe. And if you have any questions about any of this, please certainly call the office. God bless you.